Welcome back to the Sports Management Podcast. Before we start today's episode, there are 3 things I want to share with you. First, I have created a newsletter that will be sent out bi-weekly. So every other Monday there will be an episode and the other will be a newsletter. The newsletter will give you early information about upcoming guests, special offers and much more. You can sign up to the newsletter by clicking the link in the description. Number 2, in the next episode there will be a giveaway. 3 people will have the chance to win a prize provided by the guest. So subscribe to the podcast in order not to miss out. You will need to be fast. And last but not least, this episode is sponsored by InSport Education, the online business school for sport. All podcast listeners get 10% off all courses. Check the description for more information. Now, let's kick off the episode. Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipson. Today's guest is the Global Partnerships Activation Manager at UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. She holds an MBA in Marketing and Innovation, and she has held several roles within marketing. In 2020, after working a couple of years in Italy, she returned to the United States, started working with the UFC. Welcome to the Sports Management Podcast, Tiffany Hollins.
Thank you so much, Marcus, for having me. I'm very excited to be here. And I'm looking forward to talking to you today.
I'm looking forward to talking to you too. It will be a very interesting episode, I believe. And just first of all, how are you in these pandemic times?
I feel like I'm getting back to somewhat normal feelings and everything with the world starting to slowly open up, but I'm doing well, keeping busy with work and trying to stay active, in my personal life, trying to see friends and family a little bit more now that, people are vaccinated and safe. So it feels good. How about you?
Yeah, we are still in the vaccination process here. It hasn't yet hit my age group, so I have to wait a little bit longer. But hopefully in a couple of months, most of us will be done. Yeah.
Yes.
So, yes, you are in Las Vegas at the UFC headquarters. And as I mentioned in the introduction, you are the Global Partnership Activation Manager. Can you tell us a little bit about your role and what it includes?
Yeah. So, to make it short, I'm technically an account manager. So I handle several brands and I handle everything under the sun for them. So now that the world is starting to open back up and we're having events, I'm handling tickets and hospitality for them. I'm helping with production of commercials or any video concepts that they want to do for their social medias, those types of things, working with brand ambassadors to try to work out partnership deals for them. And then my main part of my job is to make sure that they are getting their assets in our events or on our social media. So when you watch a UFC fight and you see those logos of all the brands around the octagon or on the shorts or, during the broadcast, featured by or presented by, I'm helping to make sure that those are in our live events.
That's a very interesting role, and it's been a lot of discussion around this. It was the Reebok deal that made a lot of buzz in the market. And so how is it to work, for example, when you're signing contracts with the sponsors? Is it the long-term contracts? Is it short-term? How does that usually work?
So I work specifically on the activation side, and so our sales team usually handles that. But we have different types of contracts. So we have long-term partners who are signed with us for multiple years, which is great because it provides us a lot more flexibility on what we can do for them, the types of projects that we can work on with them. So those are great. But we also do have short-term contracts. So sometimes a partner might just want to come in for one particular event or maybe, a 3-month span. So we usually see that specifically with our entertainment partners who want to promote a new movie coming out or a TV show. So for example, one of our recent fights, we had Army of the Dead, which just came out on Netflix. So we had a lot of promotion around that. And so they activated particularly in just that main event. And so, they had their logo in the octagon. They shot with one of our former UFC fighters, this whole really cool promo that was aired during the fight. And they also had some of our digital assets and social assets. So the day of our fights, we usually have a fight card that we send out on Instagram. And so they had the branding on our fight card too. So yeah, it just depends what we can work out with the partners and that type of thing. So it's pretty open.
That's really cool. And talking about UFC, it's made a really cool journey from almost being bankrupt to now being a billion-dollar company. And now this year, what I found very, very interesting was that the UFC was the first sport back after the pandemic hit. How was it to work for the company during this time, and why do you think that UFC was the first sport back?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty proud that UFC was one of the first ones back. If anyone is familiar with the UFC president, Dana White, he's very energetic guy. He's very determined, but also very caring. So when the pandemic hit, one of his main things was to make sure that his employees were good. He wanted to make sure that we all had our jobs still, that we were taken care of. So even, just for minor things, I mean, jokingly, he's told us, when the whole thing with toilet paper was hard to find, he said, to let his office know if you can't find toilet paper or something. So, yeah, it seems silly, but it's one of those things that's just, it's great to show how your company really is. We were just able to make it back because a couple of reasons. So we're not really tied to any arena, like, a baseball team or a soccer team or a football team. So when we're in Vegas, we go at T-Mobile Arena, but we also travel. So when we go to certain cities and states, we go to certain arenas. So that kind of helped us. And another thing that helped us, UFC has this great campus in Las Vegas where we actually shot our other TV shows, like the Contender Series and Ultimate Fighter. So those were ready for fights at any time. So we were essentially able to create our own self-contained worlds. We have our whole production team, our crew that can just pop up everything. And then the fighters can come in on their own and test with their corners and everything. So we were able to make it work that way. But we also, when we did come back, we were able to work with Jacksonville, Florida to create essentially our own bubble at their arena. And so we were very, very strict with the testing and the COVID protocols. So we made the fighters quarantine, very strict rules that they had to follow with being in their rooms, who was able to go. So the crew that did go to those events were heavily tested. It was super contained and limited. So I think that's what also helped us to come back very quickly. So yeah, we were just created our own bubble in Florida, and we saw that we could do that there, that we knew we could do it in Vegas. So, and then we were also able to take that same bubble to Abu Dhabi when we did Fight Island as well.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to mention with the Fight Island, because that was such an innovative idea. And just a great example of how to being flexible in the situation, because a lot of non-American citizens had difficulty traveling due to the pandemic. So you set up this great octagon on Fight Island that was in Abu Dhabi. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. One of the reasons also that Abu Dhabi was chosen was because, like you mentioned, the US closed borders, and additionally, many other countries closed borders. So trying to find a location where we could bring in fighters from all over the world was very limited. So in the past, UFC has done events in the UAE and has a great relationship over there, and they were able to make it work. So to have that fight at Fight Island or in Fight Island, we were able to fly fighters from the US, from Brazil, from China, from London, Australia, from all over the world. So that was just great there. And I think that's just what made it work. And then we were able to work with all of our partners and brands to try to accommodate them as well to make it work. So I think it just happened to be everything just aligned for us. And our team at UFC is just one of the best in the world. Dana White says it all the time. And you really got to see that during this time when everything just came together.
Yeah, definitely. If we talk a little bit about your role again and the marketing role, when you're activating partnerships and sponsors, you have a great reach, UFC, and so many people are tuning in and watching. But due to the violence of the sport, do you find it sometimes difficult to find partners because of that?
Not really. I mean, a lot of times partners are coming to us just because our reach, like you mentioned, is phenomenal. And with UFC, it's when you actually pay attention to it, it's a lot behind it. These athletes are trained professionals. They've been studying, all the martial arts for years. They're very dedicated to the sport. So it's not just a violent sport. They work as hard as, gymnasts and all of these other athletes who have literally been training for years and train multiple hours a day. It's not like they just come in and, fight. It's actually like real precision. In their head, they're calculating these kicks, these punches, how they're going to do these fights. They're watching tape and studying the other fighters. So it's a very disciplined sport, and it's not that violent sport like people think it is. So, yeah.
This episode is sponsored by InSport Education, the online business school for sport. They offer a range of different courses, for example, Foundations of Sport Business, Private Equity in Sport, Sustainability in Sport, Sports Law, Introduction to Esports, and much, much more. As a listener to this podcast, you get 10% off all of their courses using the code SportsManagementPodcast10. Click the link in the description below and sign up today. Talking a little bit about you started your career in marketing, and as I mentioned in the introduction, you also worked a couple of years in Italy. Mm-hmm. But can you talk a little bit about yourself, like what you studied and your path up until today?
Yeah, so I did my undergraduate degree, which was in business administration, and I focused in marketing in California at the University of California, Riverside. During that time, I did actually study abroad in Italy for one semester, and I loved it so much. And so after I graduated with my undergraduate degree, I worked for several years in marketing, entertainment, and that world. And at that point, I figured I wanted to get more international experience. And as an American, or pretty much from anywhere in the world, it's hard to just move to another country and look for work. It's very difficult. So I figured I'd start and do my MBA abroad and then try to work my way into the work world there. And so I did my MBA in Italy, and I concentrated also in marketing and innovation while I was there. So I was able to kind of get my foot in the door there. And yeah, so that's kind of my educational background. And yeah, I had to find my way back to Europe and Italy through education.
Having experiences from both Europe and US, how would you say that the marketing landscape differs between the two continents?
Yeah, it's definitely different. So in the US, we have tons of commercials, advertisements everywhere. When I lived in Italy and I'd watch TV, I didn't see that many commercials, which was actually very bizarre to me. Like, because in the US, I kind of feel like, oh, there's a commercial break. I'll go run to the refrigerator, or I'll go make a phone call really quick. But in Europe, they just didn't have that, especially in Italy. So it was a little different for me there. So I feel like there's not as much in-your-face advertising and marketing in Italy. And then it's just, I feel like, especially in Italy, it can be a little more risque. So things that you wouldn't see on American commercials, would be normal in Italy. So maybe, someone topless or the illusion of nudity or something you might see in European type of ads, but not so much in the US. Like, it'd most likely get yanked in the US. It wouldn't, it wouldn't fly.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so your background is not actually in sports marketing, it's more in general marketing, and you said business administration. So do you have a background in sports, or how come that you ended up in the sports industry?
Yeah, so I actually grew up playing sports. I started playing soccer at like age 6 or football for your European listeners. And yeah, I tried every sport: basketball, softball. I was even in dance for a while, and then I ran in high school, and in college, I also ran for a semester too. But my parents were also big sports lovers, and they played when they were younger. So sports has just always been a part of my life. The sports marketing industry is just extremely competitive and very hard to get into. So yeah, I just figured if I can at least get my foot in the door and start working on marketing and improve my marketing skills, that's the best way to get in. So if you can at least just get into the general side of marketing, I think it'll help you once you're ready to jump into sports marketing too.
Your current job at the UFC, was it a vacancy or that you applied for, or how did you get this job?
Yeah, so this job was posted online, but I actually didn't apply to it at first. And then I saw it come up in another group that I'm in, the Black Sports Professionals group that I'm in. And the person posted it and I contacted her about it. And she was able to help me get this position essentially, or at least get my foot in the door, I should say, at least just to make sure my resume was seen. And yeah, so I'm a big fan of these groups on LinkedIn and Facebook. I think that's one of those amazing places that a lot of people don't take advantage of. So I'm a firm believer in that, because I actually had applied for positions at UFC like over the past 10 years and just never, I just never got a call back or anything. And then, maybe just the stars happened to align at the right time with this position. So I was patient and it finally worked out.
I'm glad it did. And you mentioned the Society of Black Sports Professionals there. Mm-hmm. So what is your role within this society and what's the goal of the society?
Yeah, so Black Sports Professionals has a national chapter. So essentially, they help promote, empower, and just kind of advise other young Black professionals who are working already in the sports industry or trying to get into the sports industry. So the group is just so big that they've actually branched out and there are different chapters all over the US. So I'm in the Las Vegas chapter, which I was a founding member of. Right now, I'm not involved as much, but as a founding member, but I'm still trying to participate as much. And I try to recruit people to the group as much as possible. But there are definitely other chapters in like New York, Houston, Dallas, like a lot of the major sports hubs within the US. They're just great at helping to promote within and help to make, other companies with their diversity and inclusion as well.
Yeah, we have talked a lot about networking before and the importance, and this really highlights that.
Yes, for sure.
My feeling of the UFC is that they really promote differences.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the fight roster, I don't remember the exact numbers, so don't quote me on this, but I think we have fighters from like 80 different countries represented or something. So, I mean, if you turn on any UFC event, any weekend, you'll see fighters from Brazil, China, Mexico, Nigeria. Like some of our top champions are from Brazil and Africa right now, and like multiple regions in Africa. And it's like we also promote. So the fighters, they get to represent their countries that they're from and their flags. And UFC is also great at promoting women as well. So we have women who are also, the headline features on these events. And it's just been great to see that.
Yeah, for sure. And Ronda Rousey was carrying this flag from the beginning, and now it has really taken off. And I mean, the women's fights are amazing as well.
Yeah, we have some amazing champions like Amanda Nunes from Brazil and Valentina Shevchenko, just, these dominant powerhouse women who are just amazing, skilled fighters. And it's really great to see some of these women champions rising up, and they're also great at getting these, great sponsorship deals, so it's really amazing to see that.
How is the UFC working with the corporate social responsibility? I know it's not your department, but maybe you have some insight.
Yeah, so I don't think I mentioned this at the beginning of our discussion, but I actually started at UFC the week before the pandemic hit.
Oh.
So I worked for like a week in the office, and it happened to be one of our fight weeks. And so I was out of the office half of the time for that. And then after that, we closed down. So during that time, a lot of our CSR initiatives had to be put on hold and that type of thing. But they're slowly trying to get back into it. It's a very big thing that the UFC is focused on. So even during COVID, the UFC was helping with first responders. So in our parking lot, while our office was closed, first responders could come by and get their car sanitized, their trucks, police cars. So they were doing all of that for free for the first responders, the ambulances, everything. So I thought that was a really cool initiative that we were able to do while, the rest of the world was kind of closed down. So every little bit helps. And then I know we recently just did something with, I think it's Youth Zone in the UK, and it's a mentoring program aimed to like help young youths in the UK with mentoring and that type of thing. But I know like it's very important for UFC, and I know that in the next few months, once everything is starting to open up again, that it's something that they'll be focusing in on again.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. And in one of the first episodes, we talked to Jeff Wilson, and he was mentioning the importance of the power of sport and getting kids off the street. Maybe it's my presumption, but I feel like the mixed martial art might attract some troubled youth sometimes and bring them to a better path.
Yeah. So one of our heavyweight champions, Francis Ngannou, he, with a lot of his prize money that he wins, he's from Cameroon. He's opened like his own UFC school in Cameroon. So he gets these young students who, it helps them find a path to do something outside of, school, and maybe, give them the opportunity for better opportunities in the future as well. And then I know we've had another Brazilian fighter do the same thing, and I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but yeah, a lot of our fighters are really great about that. Yeah, just getting them into MMA is just, it's a great discipline, because it's one of those sports where you really do focus on everything, your mental health, your physical health, just everything. So it's one of those sports I think is a good one to get youth into for sure.
I believe so too. You mentioned before with the Society of Black Sports Professionals, with the networking and the importance of being in these groups and get to know people in the business. One question that I have is your best advice for young people with aspiration in sports. So would that be your best advice, or do you have any other tips that you can share with us?
Yeah, definitely. Networking. I can't say it enough. And when I say networking, I'm not talking about just going to bars and parties and that type of thing. Joining these types of groups. So there's groups everywhere. So even, if you live in Stockholm, I'm sure there's a Stockholm sports professionals group, or just if you start researching, there's literally a group for everything. So that's one of the things I highly advise. And usually what I find in those groups, a lot of people, say something like, hey, I have an opening in my company. If you're interested, let me know. And that's like your direct way in, or at least, getting your way to get introduced to them. So, they can remember you for other things, or maybe refer you for other jobs. Now that the world is opening back up, there are plenty of sports, in-person conferences, those types of events. Highly recommend going to those as well, because those do offer great networking opportunities. But you can also hear from other speakers in person and even get the chance to get your question asked or that type of thing. While we're still in semi-lockdown, joining those web seminars have been super beneficial. You can meet some really great people, even just in the chats going through. People post their LinkedIns and they say, add me on here. And I've done that for multiple things. And I've actually gotten other speaking engagements because of that, met great people through some of these webinars. And you really do learn a lot through those type of events. And there's also just job fairs. There's a ton of them that happen online. Like Golden State Warriors just had one for young students who are graduating or people looking to move into that field. So they had current employees talking about what they do and what they're looking for and ways to get into those types of roles. So I think just staying active and following all of these groups can be super helpful for you. And then there's also reaching out to people on LinkedIn. So, there's a good chance 90%, 95% won't respond. They might just add you, and you might send a lengthy letter and they don't respond. And I'm guilty of that. It's just because honestly, I get so many requests. I can't keep up some days. I try to when I can, but yeah, sometimes, especially if UFC posts a new job or something, I can easily get 100 requests in a day that I can't answer all of them. Yeah. But sometimes, you do get people who will actually respond to you and just say, oh, send me your resume or your CV or let's have a chat. And then it just leads to things. So, the worst that can happen is they just don't add you. And the best thing that can happen is they add you and they want to talk to you. So you never know.
Definitely. And I mean, this is 100% how I am getting guests for this podcast, and how I got in contact with you as well.
Exactly.
LinkedIn, and you're sending a message, and the worst thing that can happen is that either they say no or they don't answer.
Exactly. Yeah. So it doesn't hurt to ask.
Exactly. So I think that's a great advice for sure.
Yeah.
We have talked about the pandemic a few times, mentioned it, and unfortunately, this is the topic now in whatever discussion you are in. But one question that I usually ask, if you have had any bumps on the road in your career, and how you overcame these. And if you cannot say the pandemic,
yeah.
Is there anything else?
Yeah. I've had some bumps in the road. Like when I was working in entertainment, I was working for a music publishing company, and they got bought out by another company. So a lot of layoffs happened, and I was one of those people who got laid off. And, it's terrible when you don't have a job anymore. So you scramble and you hope you find something just as good. And luckily, through my connections that I've made through networking and all of that stuff, somebody did offer me another job. It was temporary, but it got my foot in the door. And it was one of those jobs that looked great on my resume. So I'm always forever grateful for her for, helping me out during my downtime. Yeah. So I think those bumps in the road is when you'll really need to lean on your skills and be confident in yourself with what you can do. And then also lean on the connections that you've made and reach out to people and see how they can help you. Because if you have those great connections, a lot of them know people or know of other opportunities that might actually work for you and be better for you. So sometimes those bumps in the road are actually just, pauses to put you on the right course for something else better, I think.
One step back, two steps forward.
Exactly.
Approaching the end here, is there something that I haven't asked you that you feel is important to mention, or something that you want to add?
Yeah, I think overall a job in sports, it's definitely, there's a lot of fun perks. You'll go to, a lot of sporting events and meet a lot of great people, but it is a lot of work. There's definitely days where you will just be busy and crazy and stressed, and you'll just question yourself. But for the most part, the good definitely outweighs the bad for the most part. And just trying to get into this industry, just stick with it. I know it's a very competitive field, and you'll just keep applying and hear nothing. And then, just be patient, because one day you will hear back. I promise you. And if you want to get into sports, you don't necessarily need to work for a sports organization. So think about the brands that you really like and try to get in that way. So, you might be watching, I don't know, UEFA finals, and you see that Heineken is a major sponsor. Look into jobs at Heineken, and you'd still be working in sports. You might not work directly with the team, but I think those are other great ways to get in. And those are just more opportunities for you to look into.
That's really smart, and another great advice.
Thank you.
Yeah, the last question is really interesting, because we have talked so much about networking. I expect you to have a large network now for everything what you have said. So if you could recommend another guest for my podcast, who do you think that I should talk to?
Ooh, this is a good question. I can't think of a name off the top of my head, but I would probably say interviewing a person who just landed an internship in sports would be good, or speaking with a person who went from intern to landing that job within that organization, that sport organization, like just happened to them recently, would be a good person to talk to, because, if they were able to survive an internship during the pandemic, sorry, I had to bring it back up, and get this job, I think it would be really great to hear from them and how they did it, and, the types of things that they had to overcome, and, if they had any shifts from working a normal internship into this work from home type of internship. So, so if I think of any names, I'll definitely send you some.
Yeah, let me know.
Yeah.
Great. Tiffany Hollins, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you again, Marcus. I had a great time.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram @sportsmpodcast.